Hi, my name is Taylor Torres, and today we're going to be talking about the pathways of ATP production. Specifically, we're going to be talking about three different systems that produce ATP. The first two systems are anaerobic, and the last system is it's an aerobic system. So the first one we're going to talk about is ATP PCR system. So, like I said, this is an anaerobic system that doesn't require oxygen to produce energy or ATP. It uses the stored ATP in the muscles and phosphocreatine to help produce even more ATP. This system leans toward a can have high intensity exercise lasting for only a short duration of about 10 seconds or less. It produces a total yield of 2 ATP molecules, and we'll notice here that the ATP yield in each of the three systems varies, and we'll see here that this is the smallest ATP yield. And so, like I was saying earlier, that this system has high intensity exercises such as strength or power moves, such as jumping, a golf swing, sprinting, a tennis swing, or even throwing a ball or a football. So here on our left, we have a depiction of the ATP PCR system and the process that's occurring. And then here on our right, we have a picture of Usain Bolt, and he's about to go off of the blocks on his sprint. So we're just going to look at his quad muscle right here. And what's happening in that muscle is he's using the stored ATP that he has in that muscle to begin the first part of his sprint. Now, once he continues his sprint, he's going to use that ATP, that stored ATP, all that it has, and then what he has left, or what he, and once he's used that ATP, he's going to use phosphocreatine to boost his energy and continue the duration of his sprint. So in this system, we see that we use the stored ATP and phosphocreatine to complete an exercise with a short duration of time. This system does, though, have certain limitations. So, like I said, that it uses stored phosphocreatine. The limitation to this is that there's not a huge quantity of phosphocreatine stored within certain muscles. Also, the recovery time for the ATP PCR system is very short. So what happens is the energy is broken down and the phosphocreatine is broken down to resynthesize ATP, and the energy needed from another energy system to resynthesize the phosphocreatine. And so that's what causes the recovery time to be a little bit longer. So the next system we're going to talk about is the anaerobic glycolytic system. So this system relies on a rapid breakdown of carbohydrates, and it uses blood glucose and glycogen to break down ATP through glycolysis. So this system we see here, it yields 4 ATP, so just a little bit more than the ATP PCR system. And through this process, the energy supply process, lactate is formed and hydrogen ions are released. So that causes your muscles to have acidity. And when your muscles have acidity, that's when you start to feel a burning sensation and they start to fatigue, and it becomes a little bit painful. So in this system, the energy supply lasts for about 1 to 2 minutes, so a little bit more, or actually, oh yeah, a little bit more than the ATP PCR system, but it's not at a high intensity. It's a little bit less. It's a mid-range intensity activity being performed, and so an example of that would be a 200-yard dash. It takes a longer period of recovery because it replaces glycogen stores in the muscles, and it uses lactate as the current energy source during recovery. The next system that we're going to be talking about is the aerobic system. The aerobic system uses the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain to produce ATP. Now this system is going to be the slowest production of ATP, but it allows for the longer duration of exercise. So when we think of the aerobic system, we're going to think of exercises such as a marathon race, or cycling, just things with a longer duration of time. And the aerobic system uses carbs, fats, and it does sometimes, but usually it doesn't as much use proteins, but it can be used to produce ATP. Now we see here that 38 ATP yield is produced in the aerobic system. That's a drastic difference from the ATP PCR and the anaerobic glycolytic system. So although the aerobic system has a longer duration, it does have some limiting factors, and that's due to the fluid loss and the electrolyte depletion. That's due to the longer period that the exercise can be completed. Another limiting factor leads to maintaining the reserves of both the liver glycogen and the muscle glycogen decrease through exercise power, and that's due to, like I said earlier, fatigue. So the longer you're using these muscles, the more fatigue you're going to get, which is going to lead to the loss of electrolytes and fluid loss, as well as muscle glycogen and power and energy. So before I finish here, I want to just talk a little bit about the three systems as a whole. All three of the systems are interchangeable depending on the exercise. So if you're doing an exercise that's more of explosive power movement, you're going to be using the ATP PCR system because it's going to be lasting for a shorter period of time, but using the highest intensity. Now, if you're doing something for a longer period of time, but a low intensity, you're going to be using the aerobic system, and that's going to be more fitting for that exercise. Now, all of these systems are interchangeable, just depending on the exercise will determine which one is going to be predominant. So for example, let's say if you are in a football game and you're the quarterback of the football game, throughout that game, you're going to be probably using or interchanging all three of these systems depending on what you're doing at that specific moment or at that specific play. So if I'm throwing a football, at that moment it's a short duration, but high intensity, a lot of power that's going to be used. I'm going to be using the ATP PCR system. So that's just an example of how all three of these systems are interchangeable and they're related, and they go based off of the exercise and the duration that's going to occur. Hopefully I explained all of the systems, and yeah, that's it for today, and here are my references, and that's it. Thank you so much, and have a great day.